I'm Zach.
And I'm Jake.
We're here for the Dirt Road Men, talking about a much more somber subject today. Today, we wanted to take a stance about guns after the Florida shooting is the most recent thing that happened. 17 kids were killed. It was horrific.
Damn.
It's terrible that, that number may have changed, honestly. But after these mass shootings, after Las Vegas last year, Sandy Hook, Aurora, there's been a lot of them, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think everybody can agree with that. But Dirt Road Men needed to make a video, and we're going to try to keep this tight because we make videos on guns. You can probably guess our stance on guns, but we're going to explain it a little bit here for you. And we thought that while we're going to say our own bit, that we wanted to first let people that said it way better than us speak first. We got quotes from historical figures, the founding fathers, basically. So I'll let you go first, Jake.
Samuel Adams. The Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms.
And what made you like that quote, other than the fact that it was like almost the first one you saw? But I remember sending this one to you a couple months ago, saying that Sam Adams might have become my new patriot. My favorite patriot.
It's just... It's hard to put into words. That's just... no amount of legislation.
Yeah, that's the embodiment of what you believe, though,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's the embodiment of what I believe.
Right. And
we'll cut it down to that.
Yep. Now, my quote is from Noah Webster in 1787, and he was talking about America and the U.S. Constitution. Before a standing army can rule, it means a military power. Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every country in Europe. The supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword, because the whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any band of regular troops. And I want to reiterate, that was Noah Webster in 1787. Now, I'll go into my blurb and you can go after this. I understand people wanting stricter regulations. I think it's more of a culture issue than a regulation issue. There are a lot of regulations that are not always well enforced. The Texas shooter should not have been able to buy a gun, but the Air Force and the FBI dropped the ball. I believe it was the Air Force, don't quote me on that. But I'm willing to have a conversation with everybody, and I think political discussions are important, and difference of opinion is what makes our country great, because it's allowed here. And the Rule 1 in the Constitution, or Amendment 1, is freedom of speech, freedom to speak your mind and your opinion, and everyone should have difference of opinion. But Amendment 2 is to keep guns, and that is, and yes, I know it can be wordier, that is so that, not so we can hunt deer, not so we can have fun or a hobby. That is so that if our government ever becomes tyrannical, we can overthrow it. There were a dozen Thomas Jefferson quotes I could have chosen to that. There were George Washington quotes that we could have chosen to that. And we firmly believe that. Now, there are other things we can talk about, but we want to keep this video short so we can explain our stance. I think that basically embodies our stance. Nothing, and I'll say that again, nothing is going to get most Americans to give up their arms purely because their arms ensure their freedoms. And we talked about this in 8th grade. We were asked to choose the most important amendment, and we said the second only because it ensured the first and the rest.
Yes.
And I still stand by that statement despite all of the terrible things that have happened. And I'm willing to do a lot to make sure this doesn't happen again. If I had full and primary custody of my kids, we would homeschool them, just to make sure that this school shooting junk never happens to them. And there are other solutions we could talk about, and we're not going to talk about in this video because they've been suggested. But the reason I mention this, because there's a lot of people that are like, oh, you guys won't give up your guns. And you act like everybody wants to take your guns away. 80%, at least, of what I've seen on Facebook after this shooting has been people calling for sweeping gun legislation like in Australia, which would not work here and would cause a civil war. And if you don't think that, you're naive. Go ahead.
You pretty well said what I was going to say in different words.
All right.
Yeah, no form of legislation on gun control itself, can stop these things from happening. You're telling people, hey, this is now illegal. So is killing anybody. Unjustified, killing it.
Yeah, and
there's strict things on what you can do there. But walking into any public place and just opening up, killing lots of people, one person because they cut you off in traffic, whatever, it's not okay, but it happens. It's not okay just because it's written down, it's not going to stop somebody.
Yeah. These things are horrible, and we have to find a way to stop them. I personally am of the belief that it is a cultural issue. And I'm going to write an article that's going to go on our website when it goes up called It's Not the Gun. But the short version of why I say this is people tend to make the argument that the Second Amendment was made when muskets are around. That is inherently false, and you are assuming too little of the Founding Fathers. You're assuming that they had to assume that no technological advancements would advance firearms, which is asinine. These are some of the most intelligent people in history. I regard them as the most intelligent people in recent history. Before them, you jump to Socrates and Aristotle in Greece. So let me discredit that point for a second. In 1590, almost 200 years before the Constitution was written, the first gun that resembled any kind of modern-day automatic was assembled. It was a 16-shot wheel lock. That means it fired 16 rounds stacked, like a Roman candle. There were also other guns, like the puckle gun. There was a specific kind of flintlock that fired 20 rounds in under a minute, but it took a long time to reload. They had to foresee these technologies would improve. Fully automatic weapons are not available to us. That means guns that can fire 16 on one trigger pull are not available to us.
So
easily, you can get them difficultly.
Yes, very difficultly. You have to.
I don't think that's the right word, but it's not easy.
No. So, okay, so for me to be able to go and purchase something that was designed and built in 1590, we are in 2018. I have to
You cannot do that without...
I have to go get fingerprinted. I have to be documented. I have to pay large sums of... Large
taxes for certification from the ATF.
And it's not just like a quick little fingerprint. Like, you go to like FBI offices and...
Yeah, this isn't just the background check, which is extensive, or it's supposed to be. You cannot buy a gun that was designed in 1590, let alone a puckle gun, let alone, I can't remember what kind of flintlock it was. There were pepper box revolvers. Steven Crowder made a great video on this. The guns are not the problem. It's people and the culture that is generating them. Something is wrong. It didn't become a problem until the last 30 years, and I have a picture from a Sears catalog that will go in that article from the late 1920s, like 1929. You could get a Tommy gun mailed to your door. It's fully automatic. For like $200, which was fairly expensive back then. There was a heavy tax on it. But you could get that mailed to your door in 1928 or 29. The issue is broader than that. Now, we don't want to make videos on stuff like this, so we're just going to reference this video in the future as our view on gun control. We are happy to have conversations, but our stance that is unlikely to change as who we are, and we are stubborn people, is that. And if someone were to enact sweeping gun control like in Australia, people, including probably us, would fight to the death for that right to make sure that we don't end up like Russia, where Stalin killed millions of people more than Hitler. That's all I have to say on it. Yeah. So on probably the most somber note so far, that's us from the Dirt Road Men. Till we see you again.